still think, I still think there's a lot to learn about. There's places I haven't been.
So you geek out on the history of the trail now. Obviously, your Forlorn Hope expedition was fairly close to the Western states. How much do you geek out on it still today?
Yeah, I still think there's a lot to learn about. There's places I haven't been. I mean, that whole stretch between like Last Chance and Forest Hill, getting off the main trails and stuff, and seeing all the places like Bay Coven and the cemetery at Deadwood and the cemetery at Last Chance, and even some of those mining areas around Last Chance, the Star Town and these other places that until you get off of the main area there, you really haven't seen the real good old stuff. That's where a lot of that stuff is. But yeah, every time I get a chance to read it, the other person I've talked to a lot about that is Hal Hall. He's done a lot of the homework on and worked on the National Historic Trail stuff between Last Chance and Michigan Bluff, and it's just really fun to learn the history and find out what was going on 150 years ago there.
So what part of the history really fascinates you? Is it the mining part, or do you imagine the miners coming to Michigan Bluff after?
The thing that fascinates me is some of these places, right? You look at Michigan Bluff and 5,000 people in it. It was the place to be back in the gold.
So what part of the history really fascinates you? Is it the mining part, or do you imagine the miners coming to Michigan Bluff after?
The thing that fascinates me is some of these places, right? You look at Michigan Bluff and 5,000 people in it. It was the place to be back in the gold rush, right? You go there now and it's 100 people might live there max, right? They had churches, they had hotels, they had all kinds of stuff going on, because that was really the end of the civilization as they knew it in those days. As soon as you went from there, you're just into the gold mines. There were no more towns, there were no more stores, really. There were no more facilities. It was just encampments where miners went. But yeah, being able to read about that stuff and what it was like back in the day, and then that whole National Historic Trail between Michigan Bluff and Last Chance, where you realize that was one of the few ever toll trails. People paid to get goods moved through there. I'm sure that if you took whatever it was, like 25 cents a head of horse or mule or whatever they put in there, and you start extrapolating the cost, and you realize, wow, that was probably a lot of money back then. But that was the only way they could get supplies, out to the miners, because all the rest of the stuff was snowed in. You couldn't go the roundabout way and up, what is now Forest Hill Road, because you get snowed out. Yeah, all that history in there, and what was really important then, and how quickly that went from nothing to, super teeming with people and miners and everything, and sooner or later it just kind of went back to nothing. I mean, you look at the Rainbow Land Mine right outside of Last Chance now, it's just the shell, but at the time when they were doing hydraulic mining, I think it was, pumping out all kinds of gold.
So obviously the historic section between the mining towns, Last Chance and Deadwood and Michigan Bluff, that's 170-year history.
Yeah.
And that definitely is related to the miners. When we went out and discovered the petroglyphs at the top of Peanut Canyon, it's spectacular view of the canyon. It's just north of the Lion Ridge, Reservoir Ridge. To think that there were Native Americans sitting there doing their drawing, their art drawing, and looking at the same mountains and same valleys.
Yeah,
That kind of blew me away. These are a lot older than 170-year history that we tend to think about.
If you didn't know they were there, you would have never found them, right? Someone told them, hey, go out there in the middle of nowhere in the North Fork. There's a bunch of petroglyphs out there. Nobody would ever have found those or seen those without somebody telling them to go out there.
Yeah. I don't think they probably went into the canyons and out of the canyons just for fun like we do now.
Yeah, but what always fascinated about that is, so why were they there? I mean, what was so fascinating about that location for the Native Americans? Like, it must have been important to them. They did all that etching in there to prolong the story, right? And then now you look at it now, nobody would go in there. I mean, there's no trails in there really. There's no roads that go in there. If you want to go in there, you really got to boonie crash your way to that stuff. And it's kind of fascinating to look back and like, well, what was the world like when they were in there, to understand why that was a cool spot.
My focus has always been on the mining history, even when I go to the North Fork, outside of Western States Trail. So that's 170-year-old history.
That's what I've always said about those places. You get in there, and it's literally like, there's places where like the miners, you swear the miners left last week. You know, you go and you find a mine, and you're like, there's old ladders in there, and there's ore carts. And it's like, okay, gold, you know, it's like somebody blew a horn and the gold rush was over, right? Everybody went home. But you go in there and you're like, wow, it's really like this has been an 170-year time war. And you go out there, but that's what makes it so fascinating. So now, you know, like say you go into the North Fork, it's really extreme hiking and running in there. And you wonder why, you know, how much the resolution those guys had to get mold gold out of those mines. It's crazy how hard they worked and how resourceful they were to build stuff in there and get it what they needed and get it back out.
Yeah, I'm still blown away when I think about the effort that was involved to get the damn gold out.
Yeah, I mean, you look at like, you know, some of those places in Norfolk, like the hotel foundation, right? Like, why did they build a hotel here? There's nothing there now but a foundation. It's in the middle of nowhere. Why did they pick that spot and what was going on there? It must have been, you know, a successful mining area if people were building hotels for sure.
So what's your favorite part of the Western States Trail?
Well, for me, I've always thought the California Street was the best part for me, personally, as a runner. I always thought that was where kind of the race was, you know, kind of defined, right? If you were doing really well in there, you could run a really fast time, and if you weren't, you were going to get destroyed by the guys that were running well. So, you know, my theory always there was to try to get there without, you know, feeling too worked over, right? Because that's such good running in there. I mean, that's like 16 miles of just really nice, meandering single track. It's generally downhill. You're kind of, the day's cooling off and it's a little shadier. And I've just always enjoyed that section, whereas some of the other parts in the middle, you know, they're really cool, but man, you're just trying to survive so that you can get out the other end and, you know, start working hard again. But yeah, that's always kind of been my area that I enjoyed the most for sure.
So you ran the course before we started using it in 1986, before we started using Cal Street. What was it like when you used to go the short way through Todd Valley and then suddenly had to go this long way on Cal Street with uphills on the way down the river?
The new route certainly is more, you know, challenging and authentic, right? But you know what's fun about the old days when you used to go through, you know, Todd Valley and White Oak Flat was you were kind of meandering in through the neighborhoods there, and the people would come out and pull their chairs out, they'd be cheering you on, and you'd see the same people year after year. Because you'd be on a trail, and you'd be on a road, and you'd be back on a trail, and there'd be these people you'd see every year that just bring their chairs out from behind their property and just sit and cheer you on. And then, you know, really, when you got to White Oak Flat, there wasn't really anything hard left. It's a marathon to go, generally. They used to have a sign when you left White Oak Flat. I said, yeah, only a marathon to go, right? But you had a huge monster downhill to the river, and then the rest of it really wasn't as complicated as what you'd already seen. Now, you go into California Street, and, you know, again, you don't see anybody but at the aid stations, whereas in the old days, you'd see people all over the place, and it's kind of uplifting when people are cheering you on, even if you're feeling crummy. It's better than just being out there by yourself or with your pacer out in the middle of what seems like nowhere when you're going down Cal Street. But I think Cal Street made the course and the race a lot more interesting and kind of what Western States is, which is, you know, a 100-mile trail race that you have to take care of yourself out there and, you know, plan ahead and make sure you know what's going on. The year that, you know, they added that in, it was not only more mileage, but the terrain is significantly more complicated than what it was for going through the roads and whatnot, and through Todd Valley and White Oak Flat. And that's why, you know, that first year in '86 was kind of a train wreck down that area, because very few people had ever run it. And they didn't have a Cal 2 aid station that year. So you had to go from Cal 1, which is pretty close to Forest Hill. You're not much more than a half an hour, 40 minutes out of Forest Hill. And then you had to go all the way to Ford's Bar. And that's kind of a long stretch. There's some uphill in there. You're meandering around. And that last kind of push up to the aid station is kind of, what do they call it, 10-minute hill. You know, it's pretty steep uphill. And I remember the aid station guys in there that year, I was just saying, you guys better be ready, because this is going to be a clown show once the sun goes down. And sure enough, that night they had people, they were pulling them out in pickup trucks in the beds of the trucks trying to get them out of there, because everybody just kind of gave up. But it's such a long stretch from Cal 1 to Cal 3 to make that, and people had seen it, that they were all getting hot out to dry in there, and then got to, that area wanted to punch out.
It's fun. Well, your whole career's been something I've admired for many years, and you're much appreciated. I know you do a lot of stuff that people have no idea that you do. Some of the things you do are visible, but your contributions to the sport and to the race have been just incredible for so many years. Thank you.
Yeah, but it's been a great event, and it's been a great ride.
Yeah, it's not over.
Who spoke for himself.